Good morning. Did you know I was gone? It's nice to be back. It really is nice. I had a nice trip. It was for those of you maybe who don't know what I'm talking about, I was chaplain on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land with Jeff Cavins, and it was a wonderful trip. It snowed in Jerusalem heavily. I mean, they will get a dusting of snow every 5 years. This was not a dusting. These were inches of wet snow. And it was, we were made of tougher stuff. Most of the group was from Chicago or Minnesota, so at any rate, it was a lot of fun. And I did learn so much. But before I launch into my long, very, very long sermon, it's not really that long, I want to remind you about this. Last week was a little confusing because, of course, the 5 o'clock Mass was the Santo Niño Festival, which they tell me was packed and wonderful. Enough food to go around? I don't know. I imagine there was, but by last Saturday, I sure would have liked some Filipino food. I don't know if you've heard the line that Jesus may have founded the church in the Holy Land, but the apostles moved the headquarters to Rome pretty quick because that's where the restaurants are. Oh, there were members of our group that if they saw another falafel, they were going to just run screaming. That's what lunch every day was, falafel, which I like. But for those of you who don't know what falafel is, it's deep-fried chickpea balls. Now, that sounds awful, but it really is good. Try it, trust me. Well, let me get back to the point. Many people were at the Santo Niño Mass, where, of course, the collection was not taken up because, well, it was a special holiday for one of the great Filipino feasts. But if you did not get one of these envelopes, would you please raise your hand? Now, remember, you're in church. Don't lie to me. It's a line from Margarita Garcia 2 years ago. Who didn't get one of these? Anybody? Oh, I guess we look good. All right. This is an honest crowd. You have honest. Oh, there's somebody. All right. And it's very simple to fill out. If you have any questions about it, just you can ask me or Chick or I don't know if George or any of the ushers will confuse you on the issue. But it's an important thing. You know, this is a great. Well, I was going to say something in Yiddish that probably I shouldn't even say in Yiddish. It's a great pain in the neck. How's that? But it's important. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves, and I really had a dose of that in Jerusalem. I mean, it is amazing to see the whole world come to reverence Christ. I was sitting looking at the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Christ. Is this bench there, one of my favorite places in the whole world. And you just sit there and stare at the tomb of Christ and watch the world go by. And I'm sitting next to some guy a bunch of Italians came in. And a bunch of Italians, well, they're not the quietest people. If anyone's Italian, you know what I mean, you know? Well, this guy starts kind of chuckling under his breath, and I don't know how, but we entered into conversation. And he was an Italian from Peru, so we could talk because my Italian is passable and my Spanish is okay. And he explained they're Romans. And I thought, oh, you can tell by their accent. And he said, you see the guy taking the picture, the guy with the suit, and he's the president of the legislature of Italy. And I thought, how interesting that, I mean, there in front of the tomb of a humble Galilean carpenter was the Senate president of Rome. And now in ancient Rome, they had a Senate president. He was called Princeps Senatus. And this was an important guy. And to think that 2,000 years later, this head of the legislature of Rome, the Roman Senate, was standing in front of the tomb of a Galilean carpenter. That really struck me. And then, of course, the Koreans. I don't think there are any Koreans left in Korea. They are all either on the north side or in Jerusalem. There were Koreans wherever you went. And Poles, oh good grief, busloads of Poles, and Russians and Africans and me. It was the whole world. It just really struck me that we are members of a universal church, and that's part of this collection. You know, well, St. Lambert's. No, we're members of St. Lambert's, but we're part of something bigger than St. Lambert's, and we're part of something bigger than the Archdiocese of Chicago. We are part of the kingdom of God. And when we do this kind of thing, support other parishes, and some of this is even going to go to orphanages in Mexico. It's a binding together of who we are. Well, so it's important. If you haven't done it, do it. It's worth doing. I had a fascinating experience, he said, looking at his watch, realizing it's early. I never quite understood. Now, I'm aware the gospel is the Beatitudes, and as I always say, I will get there. But I never quite understood Jesus' statement to Peter. I give you the keys of the kingdom. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. He said that in front of a huge rock. Thou art Peter, upon this rock. I mean, it's huge. It's just this lump of, it's a rock about 5 times as long as this church and as high. And into it, or a spring came out of it. It's the source of the River Jordan. And Herod the Great had built a city there in honor of Caesar, the emperor. And one of the caves from which the River Jordan flows was called the Gates of Hell. It was considered an entrance into the underworld. It was a very deep cavern, and a supposedly bottomless spring came out of it. The spring still flows. And it was considered one of the portals, one of the entries to the underworld. So when Jesus was talking about the gates of hell, he was talking about something very, very specific. Now, never heard that, did you? I never knew that either. Well, one of the major characters in the New Testament is King Herod the Great. Not that he's written into it, but his architecture is written into it. Now, bear with me. Herod the Great, he's the one who slew the babies. He was a politician who first he sided with Mark Antony, then he sided with Octavian, and he was a ward boss and a tough guy, advisor to the Jewish kings of the Maccabee family, and he got in tight with Cleopatra. Remember her, as played by Elizabeth Burton? Lovely. Well, not really. She always seemed kind of whiny in that movie. Where was I? And so Cleopatra was his big patron.